Today we'll be talking about core value alignment and a couple of really, really interesting ideas that are actually coming to the fore right at this point in history. This is roughly the playbook that we're going to be talking about today, and really it's going to be an opportunity to flex our creative muscles and think about and imagine a couple of core scenarios. So I'll start with the artist's dilemma and gradually segue into how we can align people's values before then coming on to how we can actually fuse them and then really looking at the new world that this potentially creates. Just as a brief intro to myself, I studied law at Pembroke, matriculated in 2015 before graduating in 2018 and then going on to graduate and become a lawyer over in New York and then coming back. So I guess in terms of the three phases that I've gone through, it's the academia, it's then the legal sort of academia, and then finally settling onto what I think are some real world problems that we're really excited to be working on with EZA. And just to give a brief intro to what I do currently, because I think it's always useful to have an idea of the context in which the speaker is talking. Currently, I'm working on EZA, which I co-founded at the end of 2019. And the overall idea is, imagine if anytime you were stuck on a problem, you could get help from somebody just at the push of a button. So imagine you're stuck on a really tough problem set. There's a really nasty problem that one of your lecturers or professors has set, and you just can't get your head around it. But at the same time, you know that somebody has the answer to it, and somebody knows how to answer that question. But the difficulty is you don't know who that person is. Now, EZA has the vision that we will be able to connect you with exactly that person, so that no matter where you are, you can go ahead and push a button and get that help right when you need it, so that you never need to be wondering, how do I solve this problem? Is there anybody out there who can help me? We know that there is always going to be somewhere out there, so we go ahead and connect you with the person who has that knowledge. So what does it actually look like? What does it look like to push a button and get help? Well, first of all, I'll introduce you to the parents of EZA. So at EZA, we're actually a biotech company, and we've developed this amazing form of IVF, which allowed us to take Uber, also Einstein, and also WhatsApp, and allow them to have a little baby, which is called EZA. So what does this baby look like? Well, it looks like this. You take a picture of the question, that's the pushing the button bit, that's the Uber-esque bit. Then you go ahead and connect with the tutor, and finally, learn together. So WhatsApp and Einstein all mixed together. So it's really interesting in terms of our ability to connect students with tutors right when they need it. But I won't talk too much about EZA. I'm just sort of saying that so that you have an idea of where I'm coming from and my experience and why I've got all of these questions and why I think this is such a fascinating problem. But let's come on to the actual problem itself. And I'll touch on at the end how we can draw EZA and this problem together. So first of all, I guess I'll try and make this a little bit interactive, but this is the core problem that we're looking at. You doing what you love versus somebody else needing the result. The difficulty is that the product of you doing what you love doesn't match onto people needing that result. I mean, not going to cold call on anyone, but what's something that you like doing, but that is absolutely nonsense? Like, I don't know, it could be something like creating covers of other people's songs, right? Making Justin Bieber covers that actually nobody else has any inclination to actually listen to or watch. On the other end, there's people needing that result. So doing what you love versus somebody else needing that result. And what I think is really interesting is to see how we can actually bring these together. So my wonderful PowerPoint presentation skills over here, how we can actually bring these circles together so that doing what you love is actually matched with somebody else who wants that. So I talked about wanting actually to make covers of Justin Bieber songs and then finding somebody who wants those. Obviously very difficult to find, but this is actually a really serious problem. So on the less or more mundane side and less trivial, it's the quintessential problem of I want to do X because I love doing it, but on the other hand, not being able to do it because you think, actually, I want to do X, I love X, but I'm not able to do it because I'll earn more doing Y. So I think this is something that a lot of us face. It's something that's a constant problem that we're always grappling with. It's I'm going to do banking or I'm going to do consultancy rather than actually pursue my passion in whatever else there is, because I just can't afford to make that decision of doing what I love. So up here is the first bit of what I'm going to ask you to imagine. And first of all, does anybody actually recognize this guy or not? No? So, okay, that's fine. So his name is Jack, and about 10 years ago, he was graduating from, I guess we're at Cambridge here, we wouldn't really recognize which university that is, but it's a small one on the west coast of America called Stanford. And essentially, he was graduating there about 10 years ago. And so, like any Stanford grad, he was faced with the decision of, do I become a billionaire by starting a startup, or should I actually go and pursue my passion and become a musician? As you can see, he chose to become a musician. But very, very soon after that, he started to struggle, and he'd been warned by his parents. They told him, actually, Jack, you really shouldn't do this because you'll end up penniless. You'll live a life of penury. Look, it seems glamorous now when you're looking at it with your rose-tinted glasses, but actually the reality is quite different, right? You doing what you love doesn't actually match onto you getting rewarded for it properly. So in his first couple of years, he was really struggling, and I think the turning point for him was when he put up a YouTube video. It got 1 million views, so pretty much went viral. And he looked at the revenue that had come in, and it was about $100 or so, so a few hundred. So not really enough to make ends meet, not even enough to cover the costs of the video. So what Jack then went on to do was found a company which you may have heard of called Patreon, which allows fans to then help creators and support them. So that rather than being a penniless musician, you could then have a group of 100, maybe even 1,000, maybe even more fans actually supporting you, paying about $10 per month for a subscription to maybe have access to your songs, let's say, a week in advance, or perhaps access to your video 1 or 2 days in advance. So giving them something a little bit extra. So what he enabled people to do, what Jack allowed through Patreon creators to do, is to pursue their passion. So that's why I think this is really a good step forwards. It's a step taken by people like Jack who are able to enable creators to do what they love by allowing them to fund themselves a little bit better. But I also think that this is missing a couple of elements. And the biggest one being that as a creator, you are incentivized to create content, and your fans are incentivized in a certain way to give you some money. But it's still pretty much, I guess, Web 2.0 in that it's a step improvement. You are allowing these transactions to take place, but you're not really binding them together economically, right? I'm supporting Jack because I like his music, but it's very much a transactional thing. I'm paying him $10 a month, and I'm not really bound in terms of our success. So something that is actually super, super interesting, which I think is actually changing the game, is not just these small transactions. It's actually, what if I could share in Jack's success, right? When he became a successful musician, what if I could actually share in that? So that him doing what I loved, him doing what he loved rather, and him doing what I love in terms of me sharing in that, in the product of what he creates. What if we could share in that success together? So to come onto the second bit that I'm going to ask you to imagine, it's imagine that you have found this creator on YouTube. You found a musician who does, again, really good covers of not Justin Bieber songs, other popular songs. And he puts these up on YouTube. He's a young Canadian singer, or at least a YouTuber, and he puts all of these up on the internet. And you think, upon seeing that first video, that actually this is an amazing song. This is going to be a hit, right? And you're willing to stake money on that. So imagine if this time, instead of just paying $10 a month for that song, you could actually buy a slice in that success. If you could go ahead and say, actually, I really support you. I really believe in what you're doing. Let's succeed together. So that you can actually focus on creating that music, you can focus on creating that content, and I'm going to be able to support you. But in return, I'm also going to get something out of it. When you become famous, I'll have something which, as you might recognize, this sort of being is sort of like a token, an NFT, a non-fungible token, that I can then sell, which is very valuable, And at the same time, I can then prove that I actually discovered who is this person. Let's say it's Justin Bieber, right? The young Canadian making these covers and putting them on YouTube. So that I have those. I've got, first of all, an economic incentive to succeed together, to be able to promote you, to be able to support you further. And then at the same time, I have the added cachet of saying, I spotted him first. So that's why I think that this is actually really, really changing the way that we look at how creators create content, how we support creators, and how we ultimately help people do what they really love. But again, as with anything that sounds too good to be true, I think that this again has a couple of flaws. So number one being, okay, it works amazing for people like the JBs of this world, or maybe Taylor Swift, these massive, massive popular creators, these massive artists. But what about smaller creators? What about the people who could never become that successful? Maybe it's a very, very niche creator, somebody whose product and something that they make is only ever going to be enjoyed by a very, very small subset of people. So it could be, I don't know, people doing reviews on like VGA cables or whatever it is that's ahead of them, right? It's something that is only ever going to be confined to a very small number of people. So in which case, as a supporter, I don't have the incentive to really invest in that because I know that I'm never really going to be able to sell it for something else. So in that sense, there's no real liquidity, right? I think that's what this boils down to. There's no liquidity of I buy a slice and I can then sell it on. And at the same time, in a way, it also just sounds, because of that, like a little bit of a scam. Like I'm going to sell you this token, it's going to become really successful later on, but in reality, it's probably not going to be. So what if, on the other hand, you were able to buy that slice and it didn't suddenly become worthless, right? If you buy a pizza in the store, as soon as you walk out of the door, it becomes worthless, right? Because you can't sell it on. You've converted your cash into that slice, but then you can't then sell it on once you exit. But how do we actually change that? So let's take it back to ECA, for example. Let's say that we've got tutors, lots of tutors on one end, lots of students on the other. If I'm a student, what if I then want to reward that tutor for the amazing work that they've done? And as a tutor, I want to get rewarded as well. I want to get rewarded for the time that I've spent helping this student. As a student, I'm not going then to actually buy this NFT or this token that's issued by a particular tutor. Why? Because this tutor I may only ever meet once, because it's purely transactional. This tutor is not necessarily like a pop star. It's not going to become super valuable. But what if it were actually some form of currency, right? I could actually buy into the whole system because I know that actually what these tutors are doing and this whole ecosystem that's being built up is actually something that's super valuable. And what if then I could buy that token and I could spend it and reward other tutors in the app? And not only that, but later on down the line, if I am a student, I can also teach other people so that I, as a tutor, could then help other people and then get those tokens myself. So now we see that actually this whole economy starts becoming cyclical and it starts generating its own value. So that as a student, I'm then able to actually generate and collect my own coins. I'm able to earn my own tokens, and then I can also spend them as well. So the reason that this is so interesting is because we have both sides coming together. So looping back down to our original question, and what I'm trying to argue, is that everybody has something that others need, and everybody has something that they need themselves, so that we can go ahead and bring these two sides of the equation together. So what have we done? Well, looking at this, we've gone ahead and we've brought both sides of the equation together. We don't worry about needing to support creators, in terms of charity. It's actually something where we've brought the two values together. And why does this work? Why is this happening at this particular point in time? Why is it only happening in 2021? Why has this never happened before, right? Why is Phil up here saying that actually we've changed the game is changing, this new paradigm has suddenly opened it up? Why is it different now? And the reason is because of the internet. And I've talked about this, I guess, previously, but the problem is that prior to the internet, people weren't connected. So that if I loved making covers of particular songs, it would be hard for me to find an audience. So that if I'm living in Cambridge, I'm going to find it potentially hard amongst millions of people who live here, or hundreds of thousands in my local vicinity, who might actually enjoy listening to those songs. But the beauty of the internet is that we've now connected billions and billions of people, so that the chances of me finding that audience are actually almost 100%. I can almost guarantee you that there will be some subset of people out there in the world who will be able, who will enjoy listening to the songs that you create, or whatever product it is. So that it could be something totally esoteric, and you could just find those 1,000 people. And in fact, if you find 1,000 people who really enjoy what you love and are willing to support you with it, that's your living made up yourself. And crucially, it's not just charity. It's not just somebody thinking, oh, this person's penniless person, I feel really sorry for them, I'm going to support them. It's actually that they need it, right? Those 1,000 people who could be spread all over the world actually need what you want. They actually really want it. They actually want to listen to your song. They want to enjoy that product that you're creating. So that the end result is that this up here, this saying that I mentioned at the beginning, I love doing X, but I'll earn more money doing Y, will never again be said. So that's just, I guess, something to think about, and a final piece of food for thought as we draw things to a close. I love doing X, but I'll earn more doing Y. I think that as we've come through this, we've gone through the different stages. Stage 1 has been what we've seen with Patreon, where they're allowing creators to earn a living from their fans, so that even if I just have 100 really loyal fans who are paying me maybe $100 a month, that's enough for me actually to make a living, and it's worth more than 1 million views on YouTube. We've then come on to the second stage, which is, can I actually buy a slice in a creator? And the answer to that is, you're beginning to be able to. You're beginning to be able to share in their success. At the moment, we're still in phase 1, but I think that sooner than we realize, we're going to be in phase 2, and then finally 3. I think that the only question is when. The only question is how fast will it come, and how we will be part of it. And over at EZA, we're obviously thinking about how we can be part of it, how we can integrate this into our ecosystem. So I'll just leave my email up on this slide here. If anybody has any questions after the talk, please do feel free to email me. And I think that this is a really exciting time that we're living in, precisely for the reasons that I've outlined, that we've finally come to the point where everybody will finally be connected, that if I'm doing something, I'm always going to be able to find people who love what I'm doing. It's just a matter of finding that audience. And with the power of the internet, we'll finally be able to do that. So I guess that wraps things up for today. Thank you very much for listening. And please do, if you have any other questions, just feel free to email me, and it will be great to hear them.